All right, everybody, welcome back. We are going to continue our look through the defensive ends, and these are more guys who I think would be adequate starters in a pinch, but ideally they're depth. They're part of your rotation. And there's various reasons why that might be. It might be because of age, it might be because of the level of play, inconsistency issues, etc., etc. Bunch of different reasons why they might fall in that bucket for me. But first guy will be a long-time staple of the NFL, Calais Campbell, most recently of the Atlanta Falcons, going to turn 38 years old before the season starts. Six-time Pro Bowler, one-time All-Pro, made the All 2010s team. This guy's had a remarkable career in the NFL, and somehow, some way, he is still doing it. And he's done it mostly in a 3-4 defense, like he was in Baltimore for 3 years recently, playing the 3-4. By the way, that's some overlap with Mike Macdonald. Mike Macdonald was coaching there as the DC in 2022, where Calais Campbell was playing at that time. And most recently, he had a 6.5 sack season for the Atlanta Falcons, starting every single game. So the age is not slowing him down that much. Obviously, he's had better years, like when he was in Jacksonville and made All Pro and almost won Defensive Player of the Year. But he's still a very good player, and he stays out there for virtually, I mean, as many snaps as you could ever expect a defensive lineman to play that isn't like Aaron Donald or Chris Jones. This guy is still playing like a stud. Now, I do think we have to curb our expectations of a guy like Calais Campbell as he moves into year 38 of his life. And we have to say, look, just because he did this last year doesn't mean we can reasonably expect to get it this year. But, I mean, the numbers are good. He had a really nice year in Atlanta. He really did. The pressure numbers are there too. It's not like the sacks are just a fluke. And PFF was very high on his 2023 season. They liked him a lot. So Calais Campbell continues to chug along here. Should he continue to chug along in Seattle in this Mike Macdonald defense? Well, Atlanta gave him a contract recently that was $7 million per year, I believe. So could he settle for like 6 million? Could you give him 1 year 6 million, maybe even 1 year 5 million, and he would be cool with that? Maybe. I think it's possible. I think it's very reasonable to think that. He has to realize that his effectiveness is going to wane eventually, and it's an opportunity to play with a coach that he has a little bit of a relationship with. Maybe you could just say, hey, 1 year 5 million, Calais Campbell to come off the bench, and he might be good. Next guy I want to look at, not nearly as big of a name, but also a nice player, Justin Jones, coming off a year with the Bears. Now, this guy's much younger. He recently turned 27. He's going to turn 28 before the season starts. So, age not really a big factor here. He's, if anything, entering his prime. And this is a former third-round pick, so he's got some pedigree. He has mostly been playing in the 4-3 defense in Chicago lately, but in 2021, he was part of the Brandon Staley Chargers, playing in the 3-4. And over the last few years, he's had a little bit of a bump up in terms of his production that has gotten some people's attentions in a positive way. So I think that Justin Jones stands out as a guy you could get and just hope that he's an adequate starter. But ideally, he's rotating in off your bench and he's providing depth and he's getting to play while he's fresh against tired offensive linemen. So Justin Jones is coming off a deal where he was making, I believe, 6 million a year, and in Seattle, maybe he'd be making that again, approximately. His production is going up for whatever it's worth. PFF, not a big fan. They did not like his 2023 at all. 2022, they liked even less. So maybe they're seeing something here that the numbers aren't bearing out. He was part of a Chicago defensive line that was very good against the run in 2023, like remarkably good. And some of those Chargers defenses that he was a part of were also fairly good as well. So I don't get the sense that this is some kind of a black hole player, but maybe he would benefit from being in a rotation. Maybe the problem is he starts pretty much every game. If he's in a rotation, maybe he can save himself a little bit more. So I look at something like this and I go, this is not a bad player. Maybe it's just a flawed player being put in bad situations. So Justin Jones would be a guy that I strongly look at this offseason if this is the route we go. Next guy will be someone we're a little bit familiar with from his days with the Rams, A'Shawn Robinson. And A'Shawn Robinson has nose tackle size, and he can play some nose tackle. But overall in his career, he's lined up as a defensive tackle more. So I do think that in this defense, he would kind of rotate back and forth between the end and the middle. So, nice player, not any kind of a superstar, never been any kind of an all-pro or pro bowler or a guy who racks up massive stats. He's been in the league 8 years and he has 7 sacks. So it's not about the production. It's about holding up at the point of attack. It's about freeing up the blockers behind you. He has some experience playing in the 3-4 because he was with the Rams for a few years when they were running 3-4. Last year he was under Wink Martindale with the Giants. They're playing their 3-4 there. So he's done it both ways. So whatever kind of defense we're running, he should be able to hold up. And he's coming off a year that was kind of nondescript, so you should get a decent price. Made $5 million a year last year. He's going to turn 29 in a little bit here, so you could probably get him back for around the same price. You could probably get him for about maybe 2 years, $10 million, or 1 year, $5 million. Maybe there's a slight bump, but I don't know why he didn't do anything to remarkably well stand out in 2023. So I would say that you could probably get A'Shawn Robinson for about the same price as he was last year. PFF is pretty lukewarm on his 2023. You go back a little bit, you can find some slightly better years. Now, in like 2021, he's playing alongside Aaron Donald. Life is a lot easier when you have Aaron Donald. By the way, that was the year they also had Von Miller and Leonard Floyd. So you look at that and you kind of have to go, well, you're not going to have those guys next to you in Seattle necessarily, but he's still a pretty good player, still relatively young, and the fact that he can kind of play both positions, nose and end in this defense, is appealing. And that's also something that's appealing about this final guy I want to look at in this video, the last guy that I would put in this tier of being like a workable starter, but preferably comes off the bench, is going to be Sebastian Joseph-Day, who's finishing up a year where he played a little bit with the Niners. But despite him having somewhat of a reduced role there as part of that very deep Niners defensive line rotation, he is only going to turn 29 in a handful of days here. So youth is not really a huge concern. I mean, age is not really a huge concern, and he has something good left to offer, I think. So Sebastian Joseph-Day, we have some familiarity with him from the the Rams as well. He was a Ram for a few years. He played mostly nose tackle there, but then he went to the Chargers and started kind of going back and forth between nose and 4-eye in that Brandon Staley defense. Then he went to the Niners, and he didn't play very much. Granted, most of the playing that he did was with the Chargers in 2023. But he continued to kind of go back and forth between nose and end, so he can do both, like A'Shawn. I think that's appealing. I think that's interesting. So this is a guy who provides value on both levels. This is another guy who isn't super productive, although he is good for a few sacks a season. And you bring him in, you incorporate him into your defense, and you should have something that is preferably something you want to bring in off the bench. Like, you look at his recent years where he starts basically every game, you got to wonder if maybe that's part of the reason why he's just a guy, and bringing him in off the bench would allow you to tap into something additional in his game. He's coming off a year, by the way, where he was only making $2.7 million. I'm sure he'll get more than that, but probably won't be too much more than like $5 or $6 million a year. Maybe a few-year deal potentially, but he is kind of coming off a year where he just wasted away on San Fran for a chunk of the season at the end when the Chargers let him go. So there might not be a ton of money out there. PFF was pretty lukewarm on his 2023. They thought it was all right. You go back to 2022, it's even worse. And 2021, relatively lukewarm. So there's nothing really here that is like, oh, this guy deserves $8 million a year or $10 million a year. No, this is a guy who could slip through the cracks and end up playing for like $2 million a year. So hard for me to believe he won't be worth that. And I would definitely be there to catch him if he slips a little bit. And even for around like $4 million a year or maybe $5 million a year, I think it would be a worthwhile investment just to have that thick defensive line rotation. So that's it for this tier. Those are the guys who stand out to me as like viable starters who I hopefully can do a little bit better than, right? Like, you don't want to just try to scrape by. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you just have to scrape by, but preferably you're able to find solutions that are a little more exciting. And there are definitely those guys out there, but these guys belong in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. All these guys belong in the NFL. They might just need to find their place in a situation where they can be rotational pieces. All right, more videos coming later today. Going to be streaming on Twitch. I might already be on Twitch by the time you're watching this video. Come watch if so. See you guys later. Go Hawks. And defensive ends, a lot of them out there, and we may need some of them.